As you heard before, our main presenters today are Mike House and Ken Ismert. No strangers to Oasis. In fact, I dare go as far to say that they are pivotal in the creation and ongoing, I guess in the ongoing of our community. Their talk today, as you heard, is called A Streetcar Named Dilemma, the New Science of Morality. Exactly what is this streetcar, why it was named Dilemma, and how it ties into morality, we're about to find out. Here's Mike House and Ken Ismert.
First of all, I do want to thank Natalie for her wonderful talk that inspired several people to come up during the coffee break and three guys and one woman. So,
the ratio's going up.
Inspired more guys to talk. How'd you do that? I don't know. Okay.
They want to prove.
It's getting better. We're getting a better ratio. Yeah. Okay. So I was sitting across from his coffee table, and he said, "Mike, do you know what I did in the war?" I knew he was talking about World War II. I knew he had served. This was early 1990s. He was in his mid-70s at the time. And like I said, I knew he had been in the war. I didn't know what he did. He never talked about it. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, "You know what I did during the war?" I said, "No, Clark, what did you do?" And he said, "Well, I was in the South Pacific and the island hopping operations. And I carried the flamethrower. And when the Japanese soldiers would be hiding out in the holes and caves, I'd have to go in and flush them out with the flamethrower. And of course, they would never surrender. And they would come running out of the caves engulfed in flames. And it was clear that it still traumatized him to that day. And he said, "I still have nightmares about this almost every week, waking up in the middle of the night in sweat and cold panic." I had another friend, and you know, sadly, this is not unusual. Over the years, I have known many veterans of World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East wars, and I've heard this kind of thing again and again and again. People who are in close combat situations are traumatized almost all the time, and they're never the same. I was having lunch with a friend one time, and we were sitting outside at a nice patio at the restaurant. He was had been in Vietnam. He had served in the Green Berets. He was a first lieutenant and had led many patrols into the jungle. And just while we're having a normal lunch, a truck backfired, and he ducked under the table instinctively. Years and years after the war was over. But not everybody who serves in war is necessarily traumatized by the experience. I had another acquaintance who was a bomber pilot for the Air Force, spent the 1960s flying B-52s over North Vietnam. Now this guy most certainly killed way more human beings than either of my other friends did. And yet he showed no discernible signs of PTSD whatsoever, as far as I could tell. And unlike the other two, he was a pretty happy, cheerful, kind of jovial guy. And here's the important thing to remember about this. The B-52 pilot was not an amoral monster. He wasn't some kind of war-loving psychopath. For the most part, he was a decent, compassionate, normal human being whom you would be glad to have as a neighbor and a coworker. So why the difference between the foot soldiers and the bomber pilot? How can one kind of killing be so more traumatic than the other? It turns out there are very good neurological and evolutionary reasons for this. There is a problem with the moral machinery that impacts almost all of us every day. I'm going to turn it over to Ken so he can explain more about what that problem in the moral machinery is all about.
So, I'm going to talk about the Trolley Dilemma, which is a scientific thought experiment that seeks to probe moral inconsistencies of the type brought up in Mike's example. While there are many variations, the basic idea goes like this. There is a runaway trolley on the track. At the end of the track, there are 5 workers, unaware of the danger, who will surely die if no intervention happens. Between the trolley and the workers, there's a bridge over the track. You are standing on that bridge and suddenly see the whole situation. Due to peculiar circumstances, you are unable to warn the workers, stop the trolley yourself, or take any action that consumes more than a few seconds. But, leaning precariously over the railing next to you is a large, heavy person wearing a very heavy backpack. He's positioned directly over the tracks. We will call this person TS for trolley stopper. Someone perfectly suited for blocking the track and bringing the runaway trolley to a stop, albeit at the cost of their life. So, Mike, this is your dilemma. Do you do nothing or push TS off the bridge?
I think it's pretty obvious, Ken. TS has to go over. You lose 1 life, but you gain 5. Isn't that the greater good?
I'm shocked. TS did nothing to deserve this. What a violation of individual rights. Regrettably, I would respect TS's right to life. Those workers would have to become trolley chowder.
Okay, I see your point, I guess, but it's too personal to push old TS over with your bare hands. A little too up close and dirty. What about knocking TS over with a pole?
Whack poor TS with a pole until splat? That sounds even worse.
What if it was a really long pole?
No, still no.
Okay, I got it. Let's say the bridge has a trap door, operated with an electric switch. TS is standing on the trap door directly over the tracks. You have the remote and you're standing behind a low hill nearby. Nobody can see you. Simple flick of your thumb on the button. You don't have to see what happens. That's my final offer.
No one will see, huh?
Nope.
TS would never know what hit him. 5 workers go home with their families. It is devious and sneaky, but it is a harder choice. I'm torn. So, this is kind of an iteration through variations of the Trolley Dilemma. Does anybody have any reactions? What would you do in this situation?
What if you just conveniently sneeze and then it conveniently drops on the floor on
So sneeze them over.
Oh,
Okay.
and can I just add, Ken, that the idea of using a short pole and a long pole and a remote, Ken and I did not make any of this up. This is, you've probably heard of the trolley dilemma before. It's not new, but what is new, and Ken and I found out about this by reading the book Moral Tribes, where a lot of this is coming from, is that there's a whole science of trolleyology now, where scientists are looking at almost any possible permutation of the trolley dilemma. So those have been used in the long stick, the short stick, all that stuff has already been used in research. And Michelle has a hand up too, and then TC.
I've had this dilemma before, and it is a very hard one. And I personally would have trouble doing anything to that one person that lost a 5. But I realise there is a factor that changes it completely for me. I imagine of those 5 people, one of them was like my son. So
Right.
track suddenly was it TS? He has
TS is so that there's a personal affiliation with one of the workers.
So what if TS were your son?
Well, it's already.
It's not.
Are there people on the trolley?
Yeah, that we're saving the people on the trolley. Oh, yeah.
No,
And some of the variations are people on the trolley.
right.
No, I mean, if
It's
the
gonna
board is
derail.
down there, there's obviously something wrong with the track. So if the trolley's coming down there, it's gonna have a wreck. It can kill all the people in the trolley too,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And if you push, what's his name on there, you're gonna save all the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trolley.
Yeah, so you have extra lives saved on the trolley. Ken, you ought to go in now and explain.
Oh, you missed TC.
Well, he's going to give you the answer. Yeah. What's your solution, Jesus?
Why don't you ask TS? He would be willing.
Well, yeah,
As he has, if he's willing, if he literally sucks.
It is a
You're a superhero. Now, TS obviously has a death wish, hanging
Maybe.
suspended. Throw the switch.
He deserved that for voting you by hanging over the rail.
Okay, Ken's going to tell us now what's at work here.
Okay, so we
Moving
had
right
a little fun, but the trolley and our dear TS does illustrate that there is an internal moral conflict going on between a rational side that can weigh 5 lives saved versus 1 lost, and an emotional side that strongly objects to using personal force on an apparently innocent person as a means to an end. And how did this dichotomy come to be? The answer, of course, lies in our brains. The brain machinery behind the trolley dilemma has been mapped out experimentally. The conflict centers around 2 separate areas of the brain, each of which make different kinds of moral decisions. We will call these the automatic mode and the other the manual mode for reasons which will become clear. The automatic mode evolved to optimize the survival of groups. It balances our individual self-interest with the good of the group. It tends to put an emotional counterweight on selfish behaviors that are detrimental to the group, things like murder, stealing, cheating, or lying. It works at the individual level, warning you when you are thinking about doing something selfish, and it also works at the group level, giving members of your tribe the emotional justification to praise or punish your actions. Thus, the automatic mode helps reduce the amount of internal conflict within the group, which in turn helps maximize in-group cooperation. We are here in part today because the groups our ancestors belonged to succeeded with this strategy, outcompeting other groups with other strategies. Some notable things about automatic mode: it's fast, it makes snap judgments. It is emotional. It can quickly call up feelings of empathy, disgust, honor, shame, love, and embarrassment, among others. It is hard to ignore. When the manual mode fires, the result feels non-negotiable. Its function is specialized. As we've seen in our example, it's insensitive to number, and it is not capable of accurately analyzing complex situations. Because automatic mode is inherently tribalistic, it tends to encourage competition between groups and discourage cooperation. As such, it is not well suited for solving the complex moral problems we encounter today, which so often involve negotiating the conflicts that arise between groups. The other player in our trolley dilemma is an entirely different brain mechanism, the manual mode. The manual mode is optimized to find the best outcome in a set of circumstances. It is our problem solver, which we use in many ways, synthesizing our real-world situation with the inputs from the rest of our mental machinery to come up with explanations and answers to problems. Things to remember about manual mode. It tends to be slow and deliberative. It is rational, and able to weigh quantity and competing factors in determining a course of action. It is easier to override by other more primal parts of the brain. So when the automatic mode kicks in, the rational conclusion that 5 is greater than 1 seems to take so much less importance. It is general purpose and its powers can be applied to solve a wide range of abstract problems. That's more or less our general reasoning capacity. These attributes make the manual mode a much better candidate for understanding complex moral problems and coming up with possible solutions. Back to you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. It just slipped my mind what I was going to say about that too. I was going to add something on that. But you get what Ken's saying, right? And if you want to, and we've referenced Moral Tribes. Another book I would highly recommend is a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by the Nobel Prize-winning economist Daniel Kahneman. It's really just kind of blowing my mind. It's a long book, but it's filled with insights about how your brain works. And I think Joshua Green says in here that a lot of research has shown that a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, a lot of times when people think they're doing moral reasoning, they're really rationalizing kind of gut reactions from their automatic mode. So if a lot of stuff that passes for like moral deliberation in the public sphere and in the media and so forth isn't, we make up our minds and then we rationalize it and then we justify it in general. Most Americans think that morality comes from where? God. This recent issue of Harper's Magazine, they have the lovely Harper's Index in each issue, and percentage of Americans who say it is necessary to believe in God to be a moral person is 53%. In fact, I think Joe posted something like that this week also. Percentage of Egyptians who say it is necessary to believe in God. Any guesses? 95%, yeah. Percentage of Chinese? 14%. Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, that's one of the questions people ask the most about free thought is, well, if you don't believe in God, where do you get your morality from? And I think it's high time we put that old canard to rest once and for all. First of all, religion is manifestly not the source of human morality. Science, in particular the fields of cognitive neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, and cultural anthropology have shown pretty conclusively that the roots of our morality are genetic and honed by natural selection to make us good cooperators in the ancestral tribal movement. That's what our kind of basic inner sense of morality is. It's this heuristic, it's an algorithm, more or less, that enabled cooperation. So Jesus didn't invent the golden rule. Versions of it are found in almost all cultures. The desire to at least try to treat others as you would like to be treated is in our DNA. Secondly, to the extent that people actually do rely on religion for moral guidance, I'd argue that religion provides a lousy moral framework. And I don't think we should cede any ground. I'm not talking about combat or being an obnoxious atheist or anything like that, but I think we should generally firmly not cede any ground anymore to this notion that God is the source of morality. Heck, even beyond beyond the importance of the golden rule, religions agree on just about nothing on any moral issue. Even Christians disagree among themselves and disagree vehemently on issues like divorce, contraception, the death penalty, abortion, pacifism, women's rights, just to name a few. The overwhelming majority of Christians in the world today still belong to church bodies that do not allow women to take significant leadership positions. And you may say, well, I came from some liberal, well, your tiny liberal denomination doesn't count in a religious world that's dominated by like Roman Catholicism, the Eastern Orthodox, and fundamentalist evangelicals. The overwhelming majority of Christians still belong to church bodies that do not allow leadership positions to women. So, When people say that religion is the source of immorality, we'd have to ask first, which religion? And secondly, why is the perspective of your religion superior to all the other competing religions? This is what you're going to say next time someone says, you know, where'd you get your morality if you don't believe in God? Turn it back on them. They're not going to like it, but that's okay. You can do it more nicely than I can, I'm sure. The arbitrary nature of religion's moral guidance is wonderfully captured in this famous open letter to Dr. Laura Schlesinger, the Orthodox, remember her, the Orthodox Jewish radio talk show? Is she still around even?
Yeah.
Yeah, she is? Like, she berates people with the Old Testament. I mean, people call up to be abused by her, you know, and I don't have time to read the whole letter. You can find it online, it's everywhere. Dear Dr. Laura, thank you for doing so much to educate people regarding God's law. I have learned a great deal from your shows, and I try to share this knowledge with as many people as I can. When someone tries to defend the homosexual lifestyle, for example, I simply remind him that Leviticus 18:22 clearly states it to be an abomination. End of debate. I do need some advice from you, however, regarding some of the specific laws and how to best follow them. When I burn a bull on the altar as a sacrifice, I know it creates a pleasing odor for the Lord, Leviticus 1:9. The problem is my neighbors. They claim the odor is not pleasing to them. Should I smite them? I would like to sell my daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7 in this day and age. What do you think would be a fair price for her? Leviticus 25:44 states that I may indeed possess slaves, both male and female, provided they are purchased from neighboring nations. A friend of mine claims that this applies to Mexicans but not Canadians. Can you clarify? Why can't I own Canadians? I have a neighbor who insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly states that he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself? I know you have studied these things extensively, so I am confident you can help. Thank you for reminding us that God's word is eternal and unchanging. Okay, the letter is actually much longer than that. Those are just a few. You can find it online. Now, and I back when I was a Christian, I shared that one with people, and it's not a free thinker thing. I mean, religious people have to deal with this stuff too. So, how did religion get this reputation for being a font of moral clarity? And why do people still adhere to this mistaken notion that you have to believe in God to be moral? My guess is that people equate religion with morality because the teachings of religion frequently resonate with the automatic mode that Ken was talking about, that automatic mode of our brain. It's a morality based on a knee-jerk survival mechanism, gut responses that evolved to make us better cooperators in the tribe. Again, consider the golden rule, the only thing the world's religions can agree on. When we hear somebody expounding on the golden rule, it might sound like moral teaching to us, but it's not teaching us anything new. It's not moral deliberation. It's just reinforcing kind of these automatic gut inclinations. And we say, oh yeah, because we're all in favor of, at least trying to, be nice to our neighbors. So when we hear a story that espouses being nice to your neighbor, we respond to that at a gut level. Same thing in stories that evoke feelings of empathy towards others. That empathy was already pre-existing. Hearing the story did not insert that empathy in you. Hearing a story about empathy, like the story of Zacchaeus, the wee little man who had no friends, and Jesus went to his house for dinner. Okay, if you're a psychopath, that story is not going to put empathy in you. You see what I'm saying? The empathy is already there. So I think that's why people associate religion with morality, because this has had this function of reinforcing the automatic gut responses that were already there, but it's not teaching us something we already know. Or take the Ten Commandments. From time to time, people go on these campaigns to have the Ten Commandments posted in public places. Remember Judge Roy Moore and the traveling Ten Commandments monument? But seriously, it's not like someone who's about to rob like a convenience store is gonna like see the Ten Commandments like, oh, thou shalt not steal, okay? It doesn't work that way. Yeah, that's right. Oh, sorry. So this kind of simplistic Sunday school morality is fine for reinforcing that behavior that makes for good cooperators, but this approach is incapable of bringing moral clarity to complex issues that separate different tribes. Conservative Baptists are not likely to be swayed by the moral insights of a liberal Episcopalian who thinks God is fine with gay sex, and vice versa. And this is where a thoughtful, secular approach to difficult moral questions offers the possibility of transcending the old impasses. And we could create a new moral framework based on shared reasoning. So Ken's going to talk to us a little bit about how that's going to work. If I don't mess up your notes. Okay, that's good.
Thank you. So, what Joshua Green proposes in his book, Moral Tribes, is an approach that can be called deep pragmatism. And deep pragmatism is a proposed way of dealing with competing moral interests, a method of adjudicating contentious moral issues. It is the proper use of our manual mode to rationally evaluate both sides of a conflict in an impartial manner. Deep pragmatism relies on the idea of a meta-morality, a moral way of weighing different tribal moral systems. The goal of a meta-morality is to develop a common moral currency that all tribes can understand and agree on, even if it doesn't emotionally resonate so much. It uses manual mode thinking to come up with a rational framework for evaluating moral issues and tries to reduce the emotional influence that our automatic modes can have in the conflict. Deep pragmatism and its common currency are based on two key concepts, and one is the maximization of happiness and the resultant minimization of suffering. When I say happiness, that does include small h happiness like yippee ice cream, but I'm really talking about big H happiness, the happiness of not seeing your child die of disease, or the happiness of having a job so you can feed your family. In this sense, we all want to be happy, and none of us wants to suffer. And the second critical concept is impartiality. So in this framework, no one gets special consideration, everyone gets treated the same. And I don't mean that everyone gets exactly the same stuff. I mean, no one gets excluded for arbitrary reasons from metamoral considerations. So it's a very egalitarian kind of approach. Deep pragmatism seeks to achieve its goal by striving to find what works best, what brings the most happiness to the most people. It does this by weighing evidence for each course of action. This is the rationalistic manual mode approach of analyzing, researching, and building a case. It is in some sense moral engineering. It's not asking what is morally ideal, rather it wants to know what stands up, what can function. So when do we use this approach? The answer that's suggested can be summed up in one word: controversy. If there is controversy about a moral issue between two tribes, it is a sure sign that they are relying too much on their automatic modes in their attempt to resolve the issue and are getting mired in conflict. So we've looked just a little bit at what deep pragmatism is, but what is it not? And as Mike mentioned earlier, it is not rationalization. Our clever manual modes are easily used for non-pragmatic ends. You see this all the time. Rationalization is a very common misuse of reason in the service of idealistic automatic mode style ends. And it's also suggested that it's not an appeal to rights. In these types of conflict, an appeal to rights is essentially a declaration by one side that the argument is over as far as they're concerned. Rights, it is suggested, are for moral issues that are settled beyond reasonable doubt. Controversy about an issue indicates that the question of rights has probably not yet been answered satisfactorily. So, as Mike went over, religious morality is mainly the morality of the tribe. Religion concerns itself with automatic mode moral issues like honesty, loyalty, and faithfulness, and retribution for those who transgress against the rules of the tribe. Historically, religion has consistently played a role in continuing conflict between tribes. Probably everyone here can think of a modern-day example where religion or ideology is contributing to some kind of seemingly intractable conflict. It's easy to find those.
Gaza, yeah.
Right now, yeah, it's a very topical one. But the new science of the brain and its physical moral mechanisms, I think, gives us the opportunity to approach these vexing moral problems in a new way. Once morality is cast in its proper context, that of an evolved set of survival strategies enabling us to live better in a complex society, we can deepen our understanding of how to use morality more effectively. The science of morality will change and evolve, but even now, I think the direction is clear. Morality, far from being the province of a deity or religion, is something we can rationally explain and understand. While there are many challenges in meeting the demands posed by this secular rethinking of morality, the potential, I feel, is unmistakable. We can use our new knowledge to help resolve the kinds of deep intertribal conflict that is so common in our age. In short, we can do better than religion.
That's it.